I can honestly say this is by far the most toughest story I've ever read, which I guarantee you will be super interesting. It's the kind of story that would make a movie. Hey everyone, I'm George, 38M, and my wife is Emma, 35F. We've been married for 18 years and have two beautiful daughters, Camilla, 16, and Aria, 14. Up until recently, I thought we had a pretty good marriage, despite the usual ups and downs. But now, I'm not so sure. It all started about a year ago when Emma joined a local yoga class. She said it was to help with stress and to get some time for herself, which made sense to me. Between managing the house and looking after our girls, she deserved a break. I noticed she was happier and more relaxed after her classes, and I was glad she found something she enjoyed. She even made a few new friends, which seemed to boost her spirits even more. For the first few months, everything seemed normal. Emma would go to her classes twice a week, come home looking refreshed, and share bits about her day. She mentioned her yoga instructor, a guy named Luke, 36M, a few times. She said he was great at what he did and really helped her with her poses. I didn't think much of it. After all, she was excited about yoga, and I was happy for her. But then, about 2 weeks ago, things started to get weird. One evening, I noticed a small bruise on Emma's neck. It looked a lot like a hickey. When I asked her about it, she laughed and said she accidentally made it with the vacuum cleaner while cleaning the house. I remember thinking that sounded ridiculous, but she insisted it was the truth. To back up her story, she even called her friend Lisa, 35F, who confirmed it was an accident with the vacuum cleaner. Emma made me call Lisa, and I was shocked when she told me the same story. It seemed like an elaborate lie, but I couldn't prove anything. Since that incident, I started paying more attention to Emma's behavior. She also started dressing differently, wearing more makeup and new clothes. I tried to convince myself that she was just trying to feel better about herself, but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. One day, I decided to follow Emma to see if I could catch her in the act. I took a friend from work, Mark, 40M, who Emma didn't know. Mark agreed to help me get to the bottom of this. We drove to the yoga studio and waited. Sure enough, Emma and Luke came out together and headed to the coffee shop. Mark and I parked across the street and watched them through the window. They were sitting close, chatting sweetly, and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. It was infuriating, but I knew I needed solid proof. Just seeing them together wouldn't be enough. I asked Mark to approach them and say, "I'm the manager of this establishment. How do you and your lady like it here?" Mark agreed and went over, while I stayed in the car, heart pounding. He walked up to their table with a friendly smile, introduced himself, and started making small talk. I watched as they all chatted for about 10 minutes. Emma and Luke seemed completely at ease, not suspecting a thing. After what felt like an eternity, Mark returned to the car and sat down beside me. "George," he said, his face serious, "we need to talk." My stomach dropped as he began to tell me everything he had learned. In just a few minutes of conversation, he had managed to get Luke talking about their relationship. Luke mentioned that he and Emma had been seeing each other for 8 months. They had even talked about a future together, including marriage. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could this have been going on right under my nose? Mark could see the rage building in me. I wanted to storm into that coffee shop and smash Luke's face in, but Mark grabbed my arm and made me stay put. "George, you need to stay calm," he said firmly. "You need to think about Camilla and Aria. You need to handle this smartly." I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my anger. "How do you know all this?" I asked. Mark held up his phone. "I recorded the entire conversation. I only got it from the middle, but it's enough. Enough to take everything from that bitch." I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing. I had the proof I needed, but I had no idea what to do next. Should I confront Emma? Should I take the recording to a lawyer? Should I tell Camilla and Aria? I went home that evening, still reeling from the shock. Emma was already there, cooking dinner for the girls like everything was normal. I couldn't look at her the same way, but I didn't let on that I knew anything. I had to figure out my next move. That night after the girls went to bed, I sat down at my computer and started typing this out. I need advice. I need to know how to handle this without tearing my family apart. Please, Reddit, help me figure out what to do. When I got home that evening, the voices in my head wouldn't let me relax. I couldn't think about anything but revenge. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma and Luke laughing together, planning their future while I was left in the dark. Suddenly my phone rang. It was Emma's friend, Jessica, 27F. She lived not far from our house and sounded distressed, asking for my help. Without much thought, I agreed and headed over. As I drove, the anger and frustration gnawed at me, making it hard to focus on anything else. When I arrived at Jessica's place, she seemed upset, but I immediately knew I was going to fuck her hard. Looking back now, 2 days later, I can explain what I felt. My wife and I hadn't been intimate for a long time, and seeing Emma and her coach together had made me furious. But underneath that anger, there was a deep craving for warmth, for connection. It felt so unfair that Emma could find solace in someone else while I was left alone, burning with rage and hurt. Jessica opened the door and she said I needed help with something and I just wanted to fuck her. She was young, well, younger than Emma, and I noticed the way she looked at me, concerned but also something more. She had always been friendly, but now there was a different kind of warmth in her gaze. We talked for a bit, but my mind was elsewhere. When she leaned in to hug me, I felt a rush of emotions. Before I knew it, we were kissing, and everything else faded away. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't care. We made love, and for a brief moment, I felt alive again. Lying in bed with her, smoking a cigarette, I realized how much I had missed this. I had forgotten what it was like to enjoy another person, to feel desired. I had forgotten what sex was like. Afterwards, I asked Jessica not to tell Emma. She looked scared and hesitant, and I understood why. Emma was her friend, and this was a betrayal. But in that moment, I didn't feel any regret. I was angry, and I felt justified. Emma had done this to us first. She had ruined our family. Why should I be the one to uphold the moral high ground? Leaving Jessica's house, I got into my car and drove aimlessly for a while. The initial high of revenge started to wear off, replaced by a crushing weight of despair. I thought about Camilla and Arya, about how our family would never be the same. My thoughts spiraled, and I broke down crying right there in the car. Tears streamed down my face as I pounded the steering wheel, feeling utterly helpless. The raw emotion of that moment is something I can't forget. I was being honest here, in this anonymous account, because no one would know who I really was. I had shown weakness, and it tore me apart. When I finally got home, Emma was waiting for me. She looked anxious and angry. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "I've been calling you for hours. Why didn't you answer?" My mind was still a mess, but I knew I had to keep my cool. "I went for a drive to clear my head," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "For hours? George, this isn't like you. What's going on?" Her voice was rising, frustration and suspicion blending together. I shrugged, trying to look indifferent. "I just needed some time alone. Is that a crime?" Emma crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "I'm your wife. You should tell me if something's wrong. We're supposed to be in this together." The irony of her words almost made me laugh. Together? She had been lying to me for months. "You're right," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "We should be in this together." She flinched, sensing the underlying hostility, but not understanding its source. "Are you angry with me?" she asked, her voice softer now. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her I knew everything, but I held back. "I'm not angry," I lied, "just tired." The tension between us was palpable, but I didn't let it break me. We argued for a while, her trying to get answers, me deflecting and dodging. I didn't confess that I knew anything about her affair. I needed more time to figure out my next move. Over the next few days, I started to formulate a plan. I knew I couldn't just confront Emma and expect things to go my way. I wanted to destroy and humiliate her, to make her feel the same pain she had inflicted on me, but I wasn't ready to share my plan with anyone just yet. Instead, I decided to ask my readers for their suggestions. Maybe they could offer some insights or ideas I hadn't considered. To keep myself sane, I threw myself into my hobby woodworking. I had started it a few years ago as a way to relax, and now it became my refuge. I spent hours in the garage carving and sanding, letting the repetitive motions calm my mind. It was the only thing that kept me from completely losing it. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and there would be moments when I'd doubt myself. But I had to stay strong. For Camilla and Arya, if nothing else. They deserve better than this mess we found ourselves in. I turned back to my woodworking, the smell of sawdust filling the air. The rhythmic sound of the sander was almost hypnotic, helping me focus. I would take my time, plan carefully, and then strike when the moment was right. Emma had no idea what was coming, and when it did, it would be something she would never forget. For now, though, I needed to gather my thoughts and figure out the best way to proceed. And maybe, just maybe, with the help of those reading my story, I'd find the perfect way to turn the tables on her. The day before Emma's birthday, we had a trivial domestic argument. It was nothing serious, just a disagreement about the chores. Emma had been tense and irritable lately, probably because of the upcoming party she had been planning for months. She wanted everything to be perfect and had rented a large hall, invited all our friends, and gone to great lengths to ensure every detail was immaculate. Little did she know, I had my own plans for her birthday. You all asked me what to do, how to get revenge. Some tried to guess what I was going to do, but no one got it right. So let me explain. Emma's birthday was going to be a grand affair, a celebration she had meticulously organized. But I had something else in mind. A good acquaintance of mine, a tech-savvy friend, helped me create a mass message to be sent to all our friends on Facebook at the same time. Attached to this message were the video and photos of Emma with her lover at the CAF GC. I instructed my friend to wait for my signal to send the messages. On the day of the party, everything seemed to go smoothly. Emma was in high spirits, buzzing around the hall, ensuring every decoration was in place and every guest was comfortable. I watched her from a distance, feeling a mix of anger and satisfaction. She had no idea what was coming. As the evening progressed, the hall filled with our friends, family, and her colleagues. Everyone was mingling, laughing, and enjoying the festivities. I took my place on a small balcony that overlooked the hall, a glass of strong whiskey in my hand. From there, I had a perfect view of the entire room. "Start when you're ready," I whispered into my phone. My friend was on the other end, waiting for the signal. Within moments, the messages were sent. I watched intently as people started checking their phones, their expressions shifting from joy to confusion, then to shock and disbelief. They began to whisper among themselves, showing each other their screens. The atmosphere in the hall changed drastically. Emma was busy talking to a group of her friends when she noticed the sudden change in the room. People were looking at her, their faces filled with a mix of pity and judgment. She excused herself and walked towards her father, who had just received the message. He looked at her, his face a mask of anger and disappointment. "Emma, what is this?" he demanded, showing her the message on his phone. Emma took the phone, her face going pale as she read the message and saw the photos and video. Tears welled up in her eyes and she started crying, shaking her head in denial. "That's not true! It's a mistake!" she cried. But it was too late. Everyone had seen it, and the whispers grew louder. Some of her friends looked at her with disgust, others with sympathy, but no one was on her side. I watched from above, feeling a strange sense of relief and satisfaction. For once, Emma felt the humiliation and betrayal I had been living with. It was a small victory, but it felt so significant. I took another sip of whiskey, savoring the moment. As people continued to react to the message, Emma's father grabbed her by the arm and led her to a corner of the hall, away from the prying eyes and judgmental stares. They talked in hushed tones, but I could see the anger and hurt in her father's eyes. He looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and fury, his hands clenched into fists. Emma was crying uncontrollably now, trying to explain herself, but it was clear her father wasn't having any of it. The image of her father's face in that moment was burned into my memory, a stark reminder of the betrayal I had uncovered. It reminded me of the first time I saw Emma with Luke, drinking coffee and sweetly chatting, as if nothing was wrong. The same sickening feeling of betrayal washed over me, but this time it was mixed with a sense of justice. I had taken my revenge not only on Emma, but also on her lover. I won't go into the details, but rest assured, Luke won't forget this day anytime soon. But for now, my focus was on Emma and the fallout from my message. As the party fell apart, Emma fled the hall in tears. She went straight home, unable to face the shame and questions from everyone she knew. I stayed behind for a while, watching as our friends and family tried to make sense of what had happened. Eventually, I left too, heading home to face the inevitable confrontation. When I arrived, Emma was waiting for me. Her face was red and blotchy from crying, her eyes filled with a mixture of rage and desperation. How could you do this to me? She screamed as soon as I walked through the door. You ruined everything. I stayed calm, my voice cold and steady. You ruined everything, Emma. I just made sure everyone knew the truth. She lunged at me, pounding her fists against my chest. Get out! Get out of my house! I grabbed her wrists, stopping her. Our house, Emma. This is our house, and I'm not going anywhere. She pulled away, glaring at me. Fine, then I'll leave. She turned towards the stairs, calling for Camilla and Arya. Girls, pack your things, we're leaving. You're not taking them, I said, my voice firm. They stay with me. Emma spun around, her eyes wild with fury. You can't do that! They're my daughters! They're our daughters, I corrected, and they deserve better than this. Camilla and Arya came down the stairs, their faces pale and frightened. What's going on? Camilla asked, her voice trembling. Your mother and I had a fight, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. But you two are staying here with me. No, they're coming with me, Emma insisted, grabbing their hands. Let's go, girls. I stepped in front of them, blocking the door. You're not taking them, Emma, not after what you've done. George, please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Don't do this. I didn't budge. They stay. Emma let out a frustrated scream and tried to push past me, but I held my ground. In the struggle, I accidentally hit her, and she fell to the ground, crying out in pain. Bring back my beloved daughters, she wailed, her voice filled with anguish. Camilla and Arya started crying, torn between their parents. I picked them up, one in each arm, and headed towards the door. Emma crawled after us, still screaming, but I didn't look back. I got them into the car, their sobs breaking my heart, but I knew I had to get them away from the chaos. As I drove, the reality of what I had done started to sink in. My revenge had cost us all dearly. I glanced at Camilla and Arya in the rearview mirror, their faces streaked with tears. I had to be strong for them, even if it meant making hard decisions. I pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face them. Listen, girls, I said gently. I know this is scary and confusing, but we're going to get through this. I promise. Camilla wiped her eyes, trying to be brave. Where are we going, Dad? I took a deep breath, unsure of the answer myself. We're going to stay with Grandpa for a while, okay? Just until things calm down. They nodded, still sniffling. I reached back and squeezed their hands, offering what little comfort I could. Everything's going to be okay, I assured them, even though I wasn't sure of it myself. We arrived at my father's house, and he welcomed us with open arms. I explained what had happened, and he promised to help in any way he could. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind. Emma's betrayal, the public humiliation, the fight at home, it all felt like a nightmare. But I knew I had to stay strong, for my daughter's sake. The next morning, I started making plans. There was a long road ahead, and I needed to be prepared. Emma would fight back and things would get messy, but I was determined to protect my girls and give them the stability they needed. I went back to woodworking, spending hours in my father's garage. It was the only thing that brought me some semblance of peace. The rhythmic motion of carving and sanding helped me clear my mind and focus on what needed to be done. I also reached out to a lawyer, explaining the situation and seeking advice on how to proceed. He assured me that I had a strong case for custody, given the circumstances, but it would be a tough battle. Days turned into weeks, and the dust began to settle. Emma tried to contact me several times, begging for another chance, but I ignored her calls and messages. I couldn't go back, not after everything that had happened. My focus remained on Camilla and Arya, helping them adjust to our new reality. I enrolled them in a new school, trying to give them a fresh start. We spent more time together as a family, going on outings and working on projects in the garage. Slowly, we began to heal. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Camilla looked at me and said, "Dad, are we going to be okay?" I smiled, feeling a glimmer of hope. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to be just fine." We had a long way to go, but for the first time in a while, I felt like we could make it. I had my daughters, and that was all that mattered. The last update got the most views and comments, with many people writing to me about how I handled everything. Some applauded my actions, while others unleashed a torrent of hate. They called me vindictive and cruel, saying I should have taken the high road. I understand that some people would endure the betrayal and continue living with someone who could stab them in the back at any moment. But no, I am not that kind of man. I thought it would be hard to top the last update in terms of intensity. But then, when I moved to my father's place, things escalated even further. After settling the girls in, I decided to take some time to clear my head and went fishing. I left my phone at the house with a smashed screen from an earlier confrontation with Emma. I needed the peace and quiet, a chance to think without any interruptions. While I was out on the lake, casting my line and trying to calm the storm inside me, I had no idea that chaos was unfolding back at my father's house. When I returned, the scene that greeted me was one of complete horror. My father was injured, bleeding from a cut on his arm, and the house was in disarray. I rushed to his side, trying to understand what had happened. "Emma," he gasped, clutching his arm. "She came with some thug, took the girls." My heart dropped. I felt a surge of panic and rage. Without wasting a second, I helped my father to the car, and we drove to the hospital. He needed stitches, but thankfully the injury wasn't life-threatening. While we were there, I filed a police report about the attack and the abduction of my children. The doctors patched up my father, and as soon as he was stable, we headed straight to the police station. The officers listened carefully as I explained what had happened. They assured me they would act swiftly. My mind was racing, filled with fear for my daughters and anger at Emma's audacity. I couldn't believe she would go to such lengths. A few hours later, the police arrived at Emma's house. According to the officers, she ran out screaming that it was all a misunderstanding. She claimed that the thug was just a friend who was helping her move some things and that the blood was an accident. Her frantic behavior didn't help her case, and the police took her to the station for questioning. The children were unharmed, but understandably shaken. The officers brought them back to me, and I held them close, promising that I would keep them safe. We returned to my father's house, but this time, I took extra precautions. I bought weapons on the way back, just in case. Emma's actions had shown me that she was mentally unstable, and I needed to be prepared for anything. Back at the house, I sat down with the girls and tried to explain what was happening in a way they could understand. "Mommy isn't well right now," I said gently. "She did some things that weren't right, and we need to stay away from her for a while." Camila and Arya nodded, their eyes wide with fear and confusion. It broke my heart to see them like this, but I had to stay strong for their sake. Over the next few days, the police conducted a thorough investigation. Emma's story about the thug quickly fell apart. She claimed he was a Mexican who didn't speak English, and that she had paid him $50 to help her with the kids. When the officers pressed her for more details, she couldn't provide any. They never found the man, and it became clear that Emma had orchestrated the entire thing. When I wrote that, I wrote with a little bit of hysterical laughter, because it's like it's not happening to me, but to someone else. It's like some kind of fantasy. It can't be the same, right? Wanting to give Camila and Arya some sense of normalcy and a break from the chaos, I decided to take them to Disneyland for a couple of days. They needed a distraction, and I wanted to create some happy memories amidst the turmoil. We packed our bags and set off early in the morning, leaving behind the stress and fear. As we drove, I could see the excitement building in the girls' eyes. It was a welcome change from the anxiety and sadness that had clouded their faces for the past few weeks. When we arrived at Disneyland, the magic of the place took over. For those 2 days, we immersed ourselves in the joy and wonder of the park. We rode all the rides, from the thrilling roller coasters to the gentle teacups. We watched parades, met characters, and indulged in all the treats the park had to offer. Seeing Camila and Arya laugh and smile again was the best gift I could have asked for. One evening, as we watched the fireworks light up the sky, Camila turned to me with a smile. "Thank you, Dad," she said softly. "This is the best time I've had in a long time." I hugged her, feeling a lump in my throat. "I'm glad, sweetie. You both deserve this." Arya chimed in. "Can we come back here again someday?" "Of course," I promised. "We'll make it a tradition." For those 2 days, we forgot about the impending court date and the turmoil back home. We focused on each other, on being a family, and on creating memories that would help us get through the tough times ahead. When it was time to leave, we packed up and headed back home. The girls were tired but happy, their faces still glowing with the excitement of the trip. As we drove back, I felt a renewed sense of determination. No matter what happened, I would do everything in my power to protect them and give them the life they deserved. The day before the trial, the tension was palpable. Emma had been released from police custody on bail, but the restraining order kept her away from us. My lawyer and I went over our strategy one last time, ensuring we were prepared for any curveballs. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Camilla looked at me with a worried expression. "Dad, what if Mom tries to take us again?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "She won't, sweetheart, I promise. We have the police and the court to help us. You're safe here." Arya, who had been quiet during most of our conversations, finally spoke up. "I miss Mom, but I'm scared of her now." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I hated that Emma had put us in this position, but I couldn't let my anger show. "I know, Arya. It's okay to miss her. But right now, we need to focus on keeping you safe. That's the most important thing." The days leading up to the court date were filled with anxiety. Emma had been released on bail, and although a restraining order kept her away from us, the uncertainty gnawed at me. I spent those days preparing with my lawyer, making sure we had all the evidence in place. The videos, the messages, and the police report detailing the attack and abduction attempt. On the day of the hearing, I dressed in my best suit, trying to project confidence and calm. My father accompanied me, his presence a steadying influence. As we arrived at the courthouse, I felt a mix of dread and determination. I knew I had to do this for Camilla and Arya. They were counting on me to protect them. Emma was already there, looking disheveled and anxious. Gone was the composed, confident woman I once knew. Instead, she looked frazzled, her eyes darting around nervously. It struck me how far we had fallen from the life we once shared. As we entered the courtroom, the judge took her place, and the hearing began. My lawyer presented our case first. He started with the evidence of Emma's affair with her yoga instructor, Luke. The messages, the photos, and the videos painted a clear picture of betrayal and deceit. As the judge reviewed the evidence, Emma avoided my gaze, her face pale. Next, we presented the police report detailing the attack on my father and the attempted abduction of our children. The officers' testimonies corroborated our story, making it clear that Emma had orchestrated the entire incident. The room was silent as the details were laid out, the gravity of her actions sinking in. Emma's lawyer tried to paint a different picture. They argued that Emma was going through a difficult time, that her actions were out of character, and that she deserved a second chance. Emma took the stand, tears streaming down her face, pleading for forgiveness. She claimed that she never intended to harm anyone, and that she just wanted to be with her children. My lawyer was relentless during the cross-examination. He pointed out the inconsistencies in Emma's story and emphasized the danger she had put our children in. He asked her why she had involved a stranger in the abduction attempt, to which she had no satisfactory answer. Her defense crumbled under the scrutiny, and it became clear that she was grasping at straws. After what felt like an eternity, the judge finally spoke. She acknowledged the emotional turmoil of the situation, but emphasized that her primary concern was the safety and well-being of the children. The evidence against Emma was overwhelming, and her actions had clearly endangered our daughters. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me full custody of Camilla and Arya. Emma was given supervised visitation rights, but only under strict conditions. The judge also ordered Emma to undergo psychological evaluation and counseling before any further adjustments to the custody arrangement could be considered. As the judge delivered her ruling, a wave of relief washed over me. It was a bittersweet victory. I never wanted things to come to this, but I knew it was the right decision for our daughters. Emma broke down in tears, her sobs echoing through the courtroom. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the need to protect my children. We left the courthouse, my father and I, holding our heads high. The weight of the past few months seemed to lift slightly, and I felt a renewed sense of hope. We were moving forward, one step at a time. Back at the house, we settled into a new routine. The girls adjusted to their new school, and we continued to spend as much time together as possible. My father was a great help, offering support and guidance when I needed it most. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but we were ready to face whatever came our way. Together, we could rebuild our lives and create a new, stronger family. Hey everyone, it's George again. It's been 6 months since my last post, and a lot has happened since then. This will be the final part of my story. I want to thank everyone who followed along, offered advice, and supported me through this difficult time. Here's how everything unfolded. The saddest thing that happened over these past 6 months is that Emma started using drugs. At first, I noticed subtle changes. She seemed a bit happier than usual, almost euphoric. But as the weeks went by, her behavior became more erratic. Her appearance changed drastically. She looked gaunt and sickly, a shadow of her former self. It was clear something was very wrong. I later found out that Emma had started using hard drugs. It destroyed her life. The addiction took over, and she fell deeper into its grip. Things reached a breaking point when she was arrested for distributing drugs in large quantities. The police found her with a significant amount of illegal substances, and she was sentenced to jail. I never imagined things would get this bad. Despite everything, it was painful to see her fall apart like this. Betrayal had set us on this path, but drugs took her to a place beyond anything I could have foreseen. It's terrible, and I think she fully paid for her betrayal. In the end, I forgave her, as Jesus taught us. Learn to forgive, he said. And I did. I'm not angry at her anymore. I forgave her because holding on to that anger was like poison. It was destroying me too. Many of you asked about the woman I slept with, Jessica. I thought it best not to write anything about her until the trial was over. Now, I can tell you that we are in a relationship. Everything is great, and she has supported me every step of the way. Jessica has been a rock for me during this turbulent time. Her kindness and strength have helped me more than I can say. But here's something I need to share. Jessica recently confessed to me that she felt guilty about what happened between us. On the first day we slept together, she told Emma. She didn't know about Emma's affair or the trial at that time. She was just being honest with a friend. It turns out that Emma knew about my infidelity, but chose not to use it against me. She never mentioned it during the trial, not even once. When Jessica told me this, I was stunned. I had expected Emma to use anything and everything against me, but she didn't. It made me reflect on everything that had happened. Maybe in her own way, she was trying to protect what little dignity she had left. It's a lot to think about, and it adds a bittersweet note to this whole saga. With Emma in jail and my relationship with Jessica going strong, I've been focusing on building a new life for myself and my daughters. Camilla and Arya are adjusting well. They've been incredibly resilient through all of this. We found a new rhythm and are slowly healing from the past. I've thrown myself into my woodworking hobby, turning it into a small business. It's something that brings me peace and a sense of accomplishment. The girls often join me in the workshop, creating their own projects and spending quality time together. It's become our little sanctuary. Jessica has moved in with us, and she's been wonderful with the girls. They adore her, and she's been a positive influence on all of us. We've talked about the future, and while we're taking things one day at a time, there's a sense of hope and possibility that I haven't felt in a long time. Emma, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I forgave you. I hope you find the help you need and can rebuild your life. Despite everything, you're still the mother of my children, and I wish you peace and healing. As I write this final part, I'm filled with a mixture of emotions. There's sadness for what was lost, but also gratitude for what was gained. Life is far from perfect, but it's moving in the right direction. I'm focused on being the best father I can be and building a future with Jessica and the girls.